Good morning, everybody. Let's get started. This is the second of my lectures constituting a general introduction to the Renaissance in the context of the early modern era as a whole in this SPS 102A course. And I will continue with two more lectures like this on the Renaissance next week. So, on Monday, I tried to provide a general definition of the Renaissance in the early modern era, as I called it. At the dawn of early modernity, I tried to define it, to specify it in terms of the 5W1H questions of both journalism and history. That is to say, what, when, where, and who, at least. At least these four questions. And now I'm going to go into more content with regard to art as such. If you will remember, I said that the bottom line is the Renaissance is a movement in art that creates paintings, sculptures, buildings, architecture that are distinctly different from medieval art. And I said at the conclusion of my Monday lecture that it is useless to try and define this purely by words on a page, reading about it in a book without any visual images. The crucial thing is to be able to look and see the difference for yourselves and then try to describe the differences, then try to put the differences that you see into words. And that is the exercise that I will set about today. Two reminders. One, about Christianity and religious art and religious topics and religious subjects in the background. Medieval art, as I have repeatedly said, is profoundly and comprehensively religious. There are hardly any subjects or topics outside the Christian narrative, and it is a religious art revolving mostly around Jesus. You might remember, you should remember this from the first semester, this crucial difference between Christianity and the other two major monotheistic systems of belief, the peculiarity of the prophet in Christianity, the peculiarity of God's messenger in Christianity. Christians accept him to be both human and divine, to have a dual character. He is not just, unlike the prophet Abraham or the prophet Moses or the prophet Muhammad, he is not just a man, a mortal, however wise he might be, and therefore, because of that wisdom, because of that virtue, believed to be selected by God as his messenger, Jesus is not just that. He also has a divine character. In Christian religion, he is believed to have been the Son of God and therefore part of God himself. And so we have this peculiarity, the existence of a human God in the Christian system of belief. The result is, again, I'm summarizing from the first semester, to a huge extent, Christian belief and worship, Christian rituals revolve around this key figure of Jesus or Jesus Christ as he's called in Christianity, Jesus Christos. Jews or Muslims? Jews do not worship Abraham or Moses. Muslims, of course, do not worship Muhammad. But in Christianity, together with God the Father and the Holy Spirit, leave aside the intricacies of Christian belief, it is directly Jesus or Jesus Christ or JC for short, that is worshipped, directly worshipped most of the time. As a result, what happens is Christian art too revolves to a huge extent around episodes from the life of JC. This is indeed what the Christian Bible or the New Testament is mostly about. It is like 4 narratives, 4 stories, 4 parallel stories side by side by 4 of JC's leading disciples, Luke, John, Marcus, and Matthew, about the life and miracles and deeds of Jesus, and therefore they are episodic in character. You can take the Bible according to St. Matthew, or the Bible according to St. Luke, or the Bible according to St. Mark, etc., and break it down into a series of sub-stories or sub-episodes about this or that thing that is believed to have happened in the life of Jesus, or this or that act, or this or that preaching, etc., that he is supposed to have undertaken. Looking from Islam towards Christian belief and worship, you can think of it perhaps like this. It is like a series of hadiths, okay? That is the closest parallel that I can think of. The Gospels according to Matthew, Luke, John, or St. Mark, etc., are like so many strings of hadiths put together, describing, purporting to bear witness to this or that event in the life of this central figure. Therefore, what happens is, I'm not going to go into the details of this. We will see them. We will see many examples. But Annunciation, God's archangel coming to Mary and announcing that she will be the mother of, she will bear and give birth to the Son of God. Birth, nativity, Madonna and child, the flight to Egypt to escape possible murder, various youthful miracles, the Last Supper inside Jerusalem, the crucifixion, the death on the cross, the descent from the cross, Pieta, meaning mourning, etc. Many, many other instances. What happens is Christian, medieval and then also Renaissance, painters and sculptors keep painting and sculpting these scenes over and over and over again. So we have, I don't know, we probably have thousands of Madonna paintings. We have some themes, some subjects are more popular than others. So we probably have thousands of Madonna and Child paintings. Probably we also have at least hundreds, maybe a few thousands of Last Supper paintings and crucifixion paintings and descent from the cross paintings, etc. Certain themes are painted over and over and over again, or sculpted over and over again. By the way, this brings me back to the question of, how shall I say, standard production and genius. That is to say, you know, a work of genius never ever arrives out of nothing. As I was also trying to say last time, you have maybe 5,000 mediocre painters doing just average Madonna and Child paintings, or just average Last Supper paintings. And then you have maybe 500 painters of exceptional talent, and they do what appear to us like wonderful Madonna and Child paintings, much better than the mediocre ones. And then you have maybe 5 supreme geniuses whose paintings strike us immediately as incredible masterpieces way above the rest. By the way, in any aspect of life, in any dimension of human activity, this relationship between average or standard production and production or works of great talent and those of supreme genius, this dialectic is important to bear in mind. If the 5,000 were not there, you would also not have the genius works, the masterpieces. They coexist with each other, and it is out of this background of average production or mediocre production that if you don't have this, you cannot have that. Because how are they going to be able to learn? What are they going to derive lessons from? It all hangs together. So this is one thing that you have to bear in mind with regard to Renaissance art. This question of, at least initially for some time, so many works revolving around themes or episodes from Christian belief and worship from the life of J.C. Another is related to the proliferation of subject matter, also some kind of return to the nakedness or nudity which we have seen to be already present in Greek sculpture, for example, in the first semester. So this is a long-standing feature of art and art history. Prehistoric and ancient art is generally, massively, and universally naked. I don't mean every single human figure is naked, but nakedness, nudity is omnipresent. It is there in Greek art, in Roman art, in Indian art, in African art. And then what happens is, in Europe, it is overtaken and subdued by the arrival of Christianity. So you don't really get human nudity in medieval art with its profound religiosity. And then with the Renaissance, and from the Renaissance onward, there happens a double movement. I am probably repeating this for the umpteenth time, but we get art opening up to non-Christian ideas, themes, or subjects. First, the themes of art begin relatively narrow, restricted to religious subjects, and then there is this gradual expansion and proliferation of topics or themes for art. Just jump, fast forward to today, in terms of world art. Is there any subject, any theme, any human activity that is not taken up as a valid theme in the visual arts or in literature or novels or films or poetry? The coverage of human activity has become universal. It has become all comprehensive. In between, it is this movement that really begins with the Renaissance. First, you get the introduction of Greek and Roman mythology, and then you get portraits, which I have started dealing with in Hume 102A. portraits of princes, popes, aristocrats, wealthy merchants, portraits of couples, husbands and wives, married couples. You get them initially from the side, and then you get them like 3/4 frontal, and then you get them fully frontal. And you start to get individuals' portraits, individual men, individual women, husbands and wives now separated from each other. And then you begin to get ordinary or anonymous people, scenes from daily life, cityscapes, landscapes, paintings of the countryside, paintings of cities, monuments, streets, and unlimited. While this is happening in the Renaissance, there is also a re-emergence from religious constraints in another way, increasingly in painting from Greek and Roman mythology onward. You have the return or the reappearance, if you want, of both male and female nakedness. So this is something else that we have to be aware of in preparing to confront Renaissance art. These were just two prep comments, let me put it that way. And now I want to go more into substance. I'm going to show you examples of medieval and Renaissance paintings and medieval and Renaissance sculpture. The paintings will be both on the same topic, Madonna and child paintings. By now, I think we know what a Madonna and child painting is. The mother, Mary, Virgin Mary, Hazreti Meryem, is holding the newborn child Jesus, her son, in her lap. Madonna means my lady or our lady. Hanımefendimiz. You can think of it like that. So, this being a Christian topic, of course it is painted in the Middle Ages, in both Europe and Byzantium, and of course it is very widely painted in the Renaissance. So, I am going to be comparing paintings on the same topic, but mind you, the same topic, aynı konu. The fact that superficially the topic or the subject is the same does not mean that the message of the painting, the content of the painting, the spirit of the painting, whatever, is the same. Topic or subject matter and content can be very different things. What a painting is supposedly about and what it is saying to us are not necessarily the same thing. You have to bear this difference in mind. So, two Madonna and child paintings. This is late Byzantine, and this is Raphael. A Raphael Madonna and child. Raphael did many Madonna and child paintings, all of them relatively famous, and this is one of them. It is known as the Madonna del Granduca, the Madonna of the Grand Duke, because it was eventually acquired by the Medici dynasty as the Grand Dukes of Tuscany. Toskanya Grand Dukaları olarak Medici ailesi tarafından edinildiği için The Madonna of the Grand Duke adıyla anılıyor. And I'm going to show you some other medieval Madonna and child paintings and some other Raphael Madonna and child paintings. So, this is the initial set, a Byzantine Madonna and child and a Raphael Madonna and child. And here are two more medieval Madonna paintings, Simone Martini and Berlinguero. They also painted many, many Madonna and Child paintings, but I'm just taking two. So I am asking you to look at these and see the similarities between them, and also see the similarities between them and this one. And on the other hand, here are two more Raphaels. This is called the Madonna of the Pinks, because there is so much pinkish coloring. You cannot see it very clearly here, but there are all kinds of allusions to the color pink in this painting. And here is another one, possibly the single most famous of Raphael's Madonnas. This is what is known as the Sistine Madonna, and I've just taken the upper part. On Monday, I showed in my Hume class, I showed this painting. I showed it full length with the two putti at the bottom. It is that Madonna that we are talking about. So, by showing you three of each, I'm trying to say that what I have selected is not accidental, it is generic. I mean, there are many, many medieval Madonna and Child paintings are like the first one, and many, many Renaissance Madonnas are like the second one in the original comparison. So just to remind you, here is the Byzantine example, and here are both of them together. By the way, this semester, in both SPS102 and Hume 102, I'm going to try and do something that I haven't done before. I'm not going to remain content with the website and with the PowerPoints. 2 weeks before your midterm or your final exams, I'm going to create, in some room in this building, I'm going to create something like a picture gallery. That's to say, I'm going to post all the visuals, obviously not the originals, but printouts. I'm going to post all the visuals that I want you to know on the walls, and you can treat it like a Xerox copy museum or a Xerox copy picture gallery, and you can go in and study the pictures and try to memorize them visually, not just from your computer, but also from the walls. As I used to do 55 years ago, 60 years ago, when I was an undergraduate like you guys. And computers and the internet, etc., did not exist, and that is how we used to study for art history exams. But back to these. So, look at this first pair. Consider these questions. Today in the course of this lecture, I'm going to pose the questions. I'm not going to give you the answers. This is the agenda for your discussion sections tomorrow. In your discussion sections, TFs please note, you will be trying to discuss and answer these questions in your 2-hour-long discussion sections. And the idea is you should try to look and see and find the answers yourselves instead of having me lecture about the answers. So, I'm talking about these. Where are the figures sitting? What is the setting? What are the surroundings? What is the background like? Arka plan nasıl? Fon veya arka plan. Which seems flatter? Which has greater depth to it? The notion of depth. The notion of space. How is Mary depicted in both? How does Mary look like here? How does Mary look like here? Which artist do you think might have used a model, might have studied from life? which seems more like a real woman, a real mother, which is like an icon, just an abstract image, and which seems more like a real woman. How is the child Jesus depicted in both? How is Jesus depicted in this and in this? Or for that matter, if you want to go back, how is Jesus depicted here and here, and also here and here? By the way, this Sistine Madonna, when Raphael painted it and it began to be seen by the public for the first time, it is said that many contemporary artists had inferiority complexes. Correggio, a famous artist, a famous painter in his own right, is said to have taken one look at this and could not contain himself. He shouted, "And I am also alive and I call myself a painter. Ben de kendime ressam diyorum." Kind of reaction. But look at how Mary is depicted here and how the child Jesus is depicted here. Another question, are there other figures in attendance? That is to say, is it just mother and child or something else, something bigger? That is to say, representing a religious ritual. What happens is gradually, Madonna and child comes to be reduced to just the mother and child. Are there outer signs of holiness? Başka ve dışsal kutsallık işaretleri var mı? Look at this and look at this. That is to say, are they being given outer signs of holiness or sacredness, or are they being represented as just human? And question, what is the future, that is to say, the future of painting? What is it likely to bring in this regard? That is to say, the woman that you see here, given the topic, she is Madonna, she is the Virgin Mary. But is it the case that somehow possibly we get from here, from her, to this? Leonardo's most famous Mona Lisa. Is it possible to think, to theorize that it is the Madonna, the Raphaelian Madonna, or other Renaissance Madonnas like Raphael's, that eventually evolve into this? Wouldn't she be something like a Madonna if we were to somehow place a child in her lap? Or alternatively, can we say that if you remove the child and rearrange her somehow, we get this? In other words, in the Renaissance, what becomes the relationship between beautiful young Italian women and the image of the Virgin Mary as Madonna? Otherwise put, how does the Virgin Mary come to be redefined in the Renaissance in going from the mother of JC to just a young woman, maybe just a young mother? A first set of questions. Now for sculpture. I also want to undertake sculpture-related comparisons. First of all, where do we find most medieval sculpture? The answer is we find them in churches, or on churches, or inside churches, etc. That is to say, we find them very, very closely related to places of Christian worship. Basic definitions. What is a church? What is a cathedral? I should say, what is a chapel? What is a church? What is a cathedral? Şapel nedir? Kilise nedir? Katedral nedir? The standard type is church, ecclesia. Kilise, that is to say, the basic unit, the basic place, the basic location of Christian worship. You can think of a chapel as a small kind of church. It may be independent, it may be freestanding, or it may be part of a palace, part of a bigger building, a room or two or three rooms inside a much bigger building can be set aside as a chapel for relatively more private worship. So in this sense, the relationship between church and chapel is like the relationship, a bit like the relationship between jami and masjid. Okay? You can think of it like that. Cathedral. A cathedral is a special kind of church. It is not necessarily a matter of size. It is the case that usually in a given city, the cathedral will probably be much bigger, more massive, more magnificent, decorated much more expensively, sumptuously, etc., compared with all the other churches. Notice that I've used the singular. There will be only one cathedral in a city, and then not in every city. A cathedral is the head church of a bishopric. Bir piskoposluğun baş kilisesi. Church organization is divided into units called bishoprics, which each bishopric might contain various cities, towns, villages, etc. And there will be one chief church official, church dignitary, exercising jurisdiction over that unit. This fellow is called a bishop, piskopos. Cathedra means special chair or throne. Özel bir koltuk, makam koltuğu, a kind of chair befitting a certain office, like the office of the bishop. So a cathedral is the one church in that administrative unit that has the special chair of the bishop. The bishop comes to his church and sits in his cathedra to conduct mass, to conduct worship, and that is why that church comes to be called a cathedral. Cathedrals are oriented west to east. As in Islam, everything is oriented towards Qibla. You can again think of the Christian counterpart, the Muslim counterpart, and it becomes perhaps easier to understand and memorize if you deal in such comparisons. So cathedrals are oriented west to east. When you sit in a cathedral worshipping, you are facing the east, that is to say, the direction from which the sun rises. You enter probably through the west doors, and you enter the nave, and you sit down as part of the congregation, and you are the altar, the center of worship is at the eastern end of the cathedral. So, to come back to the story of sculpture, where is sculpture? They are not only but mostly on the outside doors. That's to say the portals, and especially the western portals through which you enter the church. I am going to take my examples from the most famous medieval Gothic cathedral of Chartres, around 80 kilometers southwest of Paris. And this is what Chartres Cathedral looks like. Notice there is a single beginning date for construction, but a lot of it was completed in 194, and it was fully completed by 1220. So it has taken something like 75 years to build. Why so long? Money, finances. That is to say, you have a single city, the city of Chartres, trying to have this magnificent cathedral constructed for themselves, and they are trying to raise the money from within the city. And it is not like Suleiman raising the money from all of the Ottoman Empire for his mosque, which he succeeds in getting built in 7 years. It is very different whether you have as your potentially taxable surplus collection base an entire empire or just a city. And hence, medieval cathedrals like this usually take a long time to build. Look at the west portals. This is the west end. Over here is the east end. So you would enter Chartres Cathedral through here, through these magnificent gates, and even seeing them at a distance, you can notice that all around the portals there is a huge amount of sculpture. At this distance, you cannot see them very clearly, but if you approach, and if you are standing right here, and you look up like this at the arch above you, this is what you see. So you have the central figure of JC in the middle, and you have all other mysterious figures at the side, and you have other figures representing creation and the universe up top. If you stand and look horizontally to your sides, this is what you see. You see, mostly men, but also women. Clearly she is female. And you see various figures rather elongated, stylized, fully dressed, with some of them having external religious signs like halos around their heads. For the moment, let's say we don't know who they are. But these are human beings who are depicted in a particular way. Introducing a technical term, notice this is not freestanding sculpture in the round. Instead, it is what we call relief, but high relief. Son tahlilde kabartma. Ortada bağımsız bir mekan içinde durmuyorlar. Çepeçevre etrafları boş değil. That is what we mean by saying it is not freestanding sculpture in the round. Instead, it is like they are part of the building. So my questions, I've already given some of the answers. Where do they stand? What is their relationship to the building? Do they have any freedom? That is to say, can we imagine them separating themselves from their position and moving around, for example? Is there any kind of implied possibility of a certain degree of freedom? Is there any difference between them? To what extent are they similar? To what extent are they different? What are their faces like? What are their bodies like? Crucially, what is, I might put this question up here. What is the skill level involved? That is to say, all right, probably none of you have ever carved stone, but still, how much skill do you need to carve figures like this, given that you are a skilled stonemason? Bir kere bir parça taş yontma temel beceriniz varsa, how extra difficult might it be to carve these figures? And crucially, what is their overall impact on us? What is their overall aesthetic or spiritual impact on us? Again, I'm basically posing the questions. So, medieval sculpture. Now, Renaissance sculpture through none other than Michelangelo. I'm going to show you two works of his, Pieta and David. He was born in 1475, remember? So, when he does his Pieta, he is, what? He's like 23, 24. And when he does his David, he's only 26 when he starts. He does his Pieta, and it establishes his fame. Already at 23, 24, he is recognized as the greatest sculptor around. And then he is given the commission for David, and when he does David, the competition is over. You'll see why. But, so look at Pieta. Pieta, as I told you, means sorrow. Sorrowing, mourning, yas tutmak. And it has to do, in Christian lore and legend, it has to do with the dead Jesus who at night has been brought down from the cross by his friends, his disciples. And Pieta involves his mother mourning over him. So here is Mary, and he is holding the dead, broken body of her son in her lap. And look at this. And look at how the marble flows. Look at how, I mean, you don't need, I think, any explanations, any prior explanations about this sculpture to realize immediately when you see it that this is the body of a dead man. Do you agree? He's very clearly dead. I mean, it is just hanging down. It is crumpled, it is broken in a way that is impossible for a living human body. Everything is hanging down, the legs, the head going back, the arm. Look at how the belly is caved in, etc. And look at how the marble is flowing in Mary's gown as if it were real cloth. Think about the tactile sense that you get from just observing bits and pieces of this sculpture. It stands in the hallway of St. Peter's Church at the Vatican. You enter and you see it. And it is about maybe this tall on a base. And you can think of it as maybe 2 meters by 2 meters by 2 meters. Think of it like a cube. Think of the skill level involved, and you can discuss this also in your sections tomorrow. Here is Michelangelo facing this marble cube, 2 by 2 by 2. And he has his chisel and hammer, and he starts cutting. He starts carving. And he is cutting into the cube, into the marble. And as he cuts, he has to think of, the outer edge of the gown, and then going further in, he has to calculate that. I mean, he cannot just finish first the body of Jesus and not touch anything else. He has to imagine in his mind everything and do all of it simultaneously. He is taking away millimeter by millimeter of marble away from the cube, and in certain places he has to go deep, like into this fold of cloth here, or into this fold of cloth here. Behind the first knee, he has to imagine the second knee, and he has to be able to bring it out all perfectly, flawlessly at the first try. One mistake, sorry, you throw away that cube, you take another 2 by 2 by 2 marble cube, and you start over again. One wrong cut of the chisel, and the marble is ruined. You cannot repair it, you cannot join it. You are not allowed to do that. So he does this, and the public is stunned. And then he gets the commission for David. Do you know the story of, it is in the Quran, it is part of what is called Israeliyah. That is to say, traditions taken over from the Judeo-Christian narrative. It is about a battle that happens in Palestine between two different tribes. One of them has a great giant of a champion called Goliath, Jalut in Islamic terminology, and he challenges anybody to fight with him. And from the tribe or the kingdom of Saul, the Israelites, there comes this little shepherd boy by the name of Dawood, and he says, I will fight him. And what he does is, he has a sling. He has an expert sling thrower, and he throws a stone and hits Goliath on the forehead, on the temple, and then goes and cuts off his head. The victory of the small over the gigantic. The David and Goliath, Davut ve Jalut story, comes to stand for thousands of years as a symbolic narrative about the weak being capable of defeating the strong. So, in Florence, there is a marble block taken from a marble quarry that is more than 6 meters tall, something like 6 by 2.5 by 2.5, and nobody dares touch it. It is so valuable, it is so expensive, and you have to have a certain kind of imagination to decide what to do from it. So it is given to Michelangelo after he has completed the Pietà. And he makes this out of it. The single solitary statue of David. You could say that if Leonardo's Mona Lisa is the single most famous painting ever in the history of painting, you could say that David is probably the single most famous piece of sculpture in the history of sculpture. So it is, the finished product is more than 5 meters tall and about 2 meters wide and 2 meters deep. And let me repeat, it is carved in one piece out of a single enormous block of marble that nobody else dared to touch. Again, think of the skill level involved. Think of what it means to be able to imagine. Think of Michelangelo's mind. These days, sculptors and architects would first build computer models, three-dimensional computer models, and then they would probably employ mechanical or electrical tools to cut away the stone. Michelangelo has to be able to see it all in his mind. Again, no mistake possible, no mistake permitted, and he ends up carving this. What is happening here? He has chosen the moment before the action. David is looking into the distance at the approaching giant on the horizon, at the approaching Goliath. And look at the expression in his face and consider how you would describe this expression. He is waiting in contrapposto position. We have seen, I think, when looking at Greek sculpture, we have seen what contrapposto means. The weight on one leg, the weight unevenly distributed. This is how humans normally stand. They don't normally stand like this. We stand normally like this or like this, depending on whether we are right-handed or left-handed. But he's standing in contrapposto position, and he has his sling over his left shoulder, and he has his stone in his right hand. Look, for heaven's sake, look at his right hand. It is his right arm is hanging down with the weight of the stone. And look at the veins on his right hand, swollen again because of the weight of the stone. And he's waiting without any violent gestures, in a kind of a state of calm tension, for the giant to come closer and closer. This is what Michelangelo has chosen, not the combat itself, not the outcome of the combat. We don't see any cut-off head or anything like that, but this moment of calm tension before the event. And from the calm tension, the event will eventually explode, but in our mind only, not in his depiction. So, questions regarding this. Once more, the volume, the connection, setting, background, the face, the body, the story. Where is the story? Where is the story in these figures? And where is the story in this figure? That is to say, is it given from the outside, from the overall context, or does the individual carry the story within him? Crucial difference. We say abstract things about the Renaissance involved a transition from a God-centered universe to a human. These are like generalizations in textbooks that we are made to memorize, but think about this. This question of the story being carried within the individual himself, within the piece of sculpture itself. So, where is David looking? What is his message? On how many levels can we read this message? This posture and this expression. Is it just David versus Goliath? Could it be also one city versus another, for example, Florence versus Rome? The way the sculpture was originally positioned outside the Palazzo Vecchio, the old palace in Florence, David is looking in the direction of Rome, which was the enemy of Florence at that time. Florence was a republic, Rome was the seat of the papacy, and there was harsh conflict between them. So is it also a message directed at Rome, saying, we are not afraid of you? Or is it even more general? Is it the individual versus life, or is it the individual versus the world? Is it the individual? Is perhaps David standing for all early modern individuals looking at the world around them in a new kind of attitude? These are questions to answer about David itself, but there are also questions to answer about comparison. How do we compare the Chartres Cathedral portal sculptures, Pieta, and Michelangelo's David? Thank you.